Hey there, Kenneth French of Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. We're very, very happy you stopped by. Either you're going to watch this or listen to this because you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably an entrepreneur who's either just starting out or you've been around for quite a while and you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably a real estate investor, maybe even a real estate agent, maybe a professional or of some sort, professional advisor of some sort. And well, you are stopping by because you need some valuable advice from one of the top industry leaders there is. Anyway, thank you very much. Once again, Kenneth French, Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. Really glad you stopped by.
Hey, entrepreneur, you want to make lots of money? One way is by distributing press releases. Yeah, that's shocking, but it really is true. There are so many ways to get your voice out there, but one of the most economical ways is a press release. We are hanging out with, I'll call him the godfather of press releases. I'll just call him that. That sounds cool, right, Mickie? Mickie
Yeah.
Kennedy, who's going to add some value to you, the listener, probably an entrepreneur who wants to make more money. What's going on, Mickie?
Not much. I'm just looking forward to a interesting conversation about PR and press releases.
Oh my gosh. So I've used you guys in the past. And you're not getting paid for this. I'm not paying you. I mean, the whole deal. This is really to add value to the listeners and viewers out there who probably don't know enough about press releases and also can make a lot of money. Their ROI on press releases, I'm willing to bet you, is pretty exponentially big. So why don't you tell us about you and how to get a hold of you? And then we're going to go into me asking a bunch of questions, adding some value.
Sure. So I'm Mickie Kennedy. I started e-releases in October of 1998. So it's been going on for a long time. Originally, I started with email. I had been working for a company and faxing press releases and learning what was working and not working. And all of a sudden, every time I'd fax, journalists would call and say, "Hey, could you start emailing them in the future?" And that gave me the idea for emailed press releases, and e-releases was born. But I guess about 10 years into it, PR Newswire approached us and they liked what we were doing. We were working with entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses, authors, speakers, and they don't. And they, went internally and talked about it. And their salespeople have no desire to recruit those people because their budgets are like under 5,000 a year, and they're trying to go after people who are buying a $2,000 press release 10, 20 times a year, $30,000 newsroom, and all of that. So we, thought we'd give it a try, and it's been like 15 years now, and I've actually pivoted away from emailing press releases because of the fact that media databases have come into the landscape over the past 27 years, and they've made journalist inbox sort of like a nightmare. If you talk to any journalist, they'll tell you my inbox is full of so much off-targeted pitching and press releases and spam that they really, have a difficult time navigating it. And, PR firms who pitch by email are often having to have interns and other people calling and saying, "Hey, we pitched you. Can you do a search in your email? I'll walk you through a keyword or a domain name to try and find it." And it's just really difficult. But the thing that's really changed in the landscape is because of that, journalists rely on the newswire even more. And in the U.S., it's basically a duopoly of press release newswires. Everybody is aware of Reuters and the Associated Press and United Press International. They don't run press releases. Everything they run, they've written. And they license their content to newspapers and websites and media outlets. But as far as newswires that run press releases, it's basically just those two. And there was a third player, but they've sort of pivoted because the market changed and journalists stopped going to them because journalists over the last 10 years are having to write more articles instead of like 3 to 4 articles a week. It might be 2 or 3 articles a day. And so, journalists are finding that they're having to do more and they have less time to think and research. And so they rely even more on those 2 newswires, and their inbox has become something that is no longer an asset for them. And so for those reasons, the newswire is an amazing opportunity. But, PR Newswire, for example, charges $1,700 plus for a 600-word press release to go out nationally. And, I found that that's out of the reach of most of my customers. And the Newswire and I were able to navigate pricing over the years. And today I do over 10,000 releases, and all of my releases go out nationally over PR Newswire. And, we don't have to pay anything close to $1,700. And so it's a lot cheaper for, entrepreneurs and startups and others to access the Newswire and get that benefit by going directly through us.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, how does someone order one of your packages or what have you, or get a hold of you? Let's get that out of the way because I'll forget.
So the website's ereleases.com. We have a lot of social media on the lower right, but in our footer, you'll see we have a new customer special. That's the best place to start because you get our newsmaker, which I think is normally, I think it's $4.99 or $5.99, and you get it for $3.49. And so you can also buy a package at that rate, and we actually keep that package option open to you for 30 days after your first release. So if you try us at the incoming price, you can lock in that after you've tested us and you decided you liked us, and start your savings there.
I got you. All right. I got to tell you, I'm a little embarrassed. I have so many questions and all of a sudden they're just all in my head. I can't even get them out. So let's assume, sell me. How about this? Let's say I'm an entrepreneur, which I am, but let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I want to now start marketing my business. I have a bunch of cool things. This is actually real. A bunch of cool things coming up. Why press releases, and walk me down that road. I think a lot of our viewers and listeners will gain some positive benefits for them as well.
Sure. So most people are aware of paid advertising, Google, paid advertising, Facebook, others. And that seems to be the way that most people do because it's very scalable. You can just cut it on, but it's also very expensive. When it comes to PR, it's not very expensive. Using a service like ours, you can build a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases and not even spend $4,000. And for the average small business and entrepreneur, it might take you 2 years or a year and a half to use 6 to 8 releases. And I often tell people, you can do more if you have more milestones. There are some businesses who are constantly doing, new deals, new partnerships. They're bringing on veteran talent that the industry will recognize. And so those are certainly newsworthy events that you want to do. But the average small business, they have to sort of fight and challenge themselves to get like maybe a press release a quarter. And so, like I said, it might take you a year and a half to 2 years. So for under $5,000, you can write and distribute, 8 releases, and maybe it takes 2 years. But the most important thing to recognize is that if one of those press releases gets picked up and does extremely well, it can really move the needle in a way that paid advertising, can't hold a candle. I had one client who did a press release and got an article in Waste Management. It was a monthly trade publication, and they ended up getting discovered by a city in Australia that ended up using them to build 3 waste management facilities. I think over $40 million in business at one article. I have a case study on our website about a very short-lived initiative called the Dining Bond Initiative that was set up during the pandemic. And it was meant to help restaurants that were closed during the pandemic. And basically, if you had your favorite local restaurant, maybe the one you went to on your anniversary, and you're worried about them because there's a lot of uncertainty, and you could maybe donate $50 or $100, and it would sort of be backed by a gift certificate. Dining bond is how they sort of did it. And volunteers would then try to reach the restaurant, and if they got in touch with them, the money went directly to them. And if they couldn't reach them, they wouldn't accept money from you. But it raised over $10 million, resulted in over 100 articles, like the Wall Street Journal and big places picked it up. But it did really well with daily papers. As a matter of fact, I suspect it did closer to 150 to 200 media pickups, because after a while, we stopped recording the pickups in daily papers because they were just everywhere. And so that one did so well because it was positive news in a time where there was a lot of uncertainty and negative sentiment, and journalists like to counter that. And so if you had positive news at that time, you had a very strong likelihood that the media would consider it. And also, we were sent home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and we know how that turned out, but we felt powerless. And here was something actionable that we could do. We could make a small donation to a restaurant or a pizza place or something locally that we cared about. and it made a difference. And so I think that's why that did very well. But it shows that if you have something that's newsworthy and engaging, going on a newswire allows it to go to so many places. And all of these were individual articles. It wasn't the same article that was licensed or put on a lot of these places. Every article in every newspaper was uniquely written by a journalist at that organization. And, that is amazing original content. It helps your SEO even when they don't link to you. Google has a patent for being able to tell when an authoritative website is talking about you and to give you a link credit, even if there is no actual link there. And so, getting picked up in the Wall Street Journal, getting picked up in the New York Times, my clients know when that happens, their SEO goes through the roof, even when there is no actual link or anything like that. And so, these are all some of the benefits of PR. The customers you generally get from an article like that, they generally don't open a window and say, I just read about this great company. Now let me go see if I can find it cheaper on Amazon or somewhere else. They are engaged. They have a sort of like a signal of trust when a journalist writes about you, and they want to do business with you. And so they're less likely to price shop, and they tend to stick around and be more loyal. And so these are some of the best customers that you can bring on board. And it even helps you with your existing conversions. Your leads, if you put that article in front of them, they'll read about you and they'll go, wow, this journalist wrote about you. It's almost like an implied endorsement. And, they are then more likely to convert. And the same thing with churn. We find that people who do PR and get articles and put those articles on their social media, on their website, and their newsletters, get it in front of their customers, that it reduces their churn rate, because customers always sit there and say, hey, it's been a couple of years we've been using this person. Maybe we should consider looking around to make sure we're using the right company. But if all of a sudden they see you in a trade magazine and it's talking favorably about what you're doing, and it seems like you're on the cutting edge of your industry, they're probably not even going to bother to shop around. They're going to feel like, oh yeah, we're with the right company. This is great. And so these are all the things that PR does that advertising can't do. I mean, I've had people say, hey, that article we got 400 people who visited us from that article, and 240 of them converted. They bought something. Is that even possible? And I'm like, yeah, not everybody who read the article went to your website, but those that did, they had that, signal of trust, and you were a consumer product under, I think, $40. So yeah, it's very likely that more than 50% of them who came from the article actually purchased from you. I've never heard of a paid ad where a landing page converts anything close to over 50%. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. So let me explain how I think the logistics. Remember, I'm naive. I don't know anything. How it works. So people go onto your website. They write in general. I'm going to be be general. They write the press release. Usually nowadays, I would say with artificial intelligence as a probably foundation, and then they put on their cool little news spin on their own press release. Then you guys distribute it because you have cool relationships, also cool technology. So it goes out to all these kind of member organizations, and then I bet you about whatever 200 to 500 groups pick it up kind of automatically, and then they put it on their website or in their physical print, and then people, therefore, just like you're saying, read the print, or obviously, as you're saying, um, someone who writes for the newspaper, a journalist, would also write an article or put their specific spin on the news. And then let's say me, I live on Bainbridge Island, Washington. They would see the article in whatever my local publication, and then call me or knock on my door or do a click on a website. So just in general, does that sound about right?
It does. Now, it is one of those things where not every press release is going to generate actual articles about you. There's something called syndication where the press release gets on a few websites like Yahoo Finance and things like that. And I always tell people, don't get excited by that. They're usually locations on the website that a lot of humans don't really pay a lot of attention or look. But what we're looking for is that article that journalists write about you, and that's the earned media that we're looking for. And that being said, I find that a lot of people are using AI to write press releases, but unfortunately, a lot of people are also using AI to generate what the press release should be about. And that's like the biggest mistake I think I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
And the reason is AI has been trained on all the press releases out there. And I would say like 97% of the press releases out there don't generate earned media. And so it's going to suggest press releases to you that probably will not generate earned media. The thing I did during the pandemic was I looked at the 3% of press releases that do get picked up, and I found lots of patterns there. And I put together some training to try to educate people to the types of press releases they should be doing. And it's completely free if anyone wants to look at it. It's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's less than an hour-long video. It's not a huge commitment. And there's some accompanying materials. But, it talks about the fact that, there are, sometimes being a contrarian is a really great way to stand out, because journalists often will cover a topic that's trending and everybody sort of jumps into it. And it's too competitive. Everybody's doing that. But if you're the one person that's raising your hand and saying, hey, I think electric cars are terrible for the industry, and for the environment and for the world. For example, the labor involved in getting these minerals out of mines often involves children, and they're unsafe. And what are we going to do with these batteries at the end of their life? Are we creating even more problems in landfills? And, have you seen electric car get in a crash? Sometimes they start fires that require not 8, 9, but 12 to 14 fire trucks to put it out. Hundreds of thousands of gallons to put a lithium battery fire out. And it's like, you're not crazy and you sound rational, but you're giving a contrarian viewpoint. And journalists like to be fair and balanced. But often when you read articles, there's nobody representing the other side.
Yeah,
because no one's raised their hand and said, I'm this guy, quote me, I'm available, put me in. And if you do that, you stand the chance of being picked up, not in 2 or 3 articles, but potentially dozens, if not hundreds of articles. And so that's just one of the little hacks that I talk about in that thing. Another one is, being story based. Journalists like to write in a story arc, even if it's a very small article. And the most common press release I get is a product or service launch. And it's usually, here's our new product or service. Here's a list of features. Here's a page to learn more and buy it. And a journalist who likes to follow a story arc, he's looking at that and saying, not a lot to bite into. And, the easiest thing to do is to inject a use case study. You didn't take this product or service to the market without people trying it out. And so what was a favorable response someone had? Oh, this company was losing 12% a year. They started 3 years ago. After using your software logistics solution to write invoices for 90 days, they're projected to have a 8% net profit for the first time. That is a very meaningful outcome. Take a data point that's already publicly available, like what's the failure rate of businesses in the transportation industry in the first 5 years. It's probably like 60, 70%. Put that publicly available number in there. It really anchors why your solution is so valuable. And here was a company that looked like they were poised to be the next casualty, and you've completely turned them around. That's something that will excite a journalist and want to tell that story to their audience. And then put a quote by them talking about, wow, we didn't realize something as simple as writing invoices intelligently with all the data and expenses in there would have made such a meaningful difference to us. And it certainly looks like, this product, this service is very easy to use. Something just really nice and just speaks better than you saying it. And those are the types of articles that journalists love to write. So many people write press releases selfishly, in that we want to sell, so we believe it's important, and therefore you should believe it's important. But a journalist, you have to put their frame of mind on, so put yourself in their shoes, and it's like they have to decide how to entertain or educate their audience. And what could you put in your press release that will either entertain or educate or both for their audience? And telling a good story, really showing the stakes of why something's important. So taking publicly available data points and putting them in your press release is a great way to anchor it and make it seem more meaningful. Putting a story in there about a use case, things like that. And those are just a few of the things that AI doesn't really get.
Those are really
But
good. It sounds like that. Sorry to cut you off, but this is important. It sounds like that is a huge resource. Can you remind me of that resource again?
sure, it's ereleases.com/plan, PLAN, and it's completely free. Just put your email address in and you'll get a download as well as you'll be able to see the video, less than an hour long. It was originally like 6 hours, and someone said, "Oh, Mickie, that's a big ask for people." So
Come on, Mickie.
we're in the TikTok era. Can you get it into like 3 minutes or less? And I'm like,
That's
I
exactly
can't get
right.
it in
All right,
3
cool.
minutes or less, but I got it under an hour.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, let me ask some other questions. So I think a benefit is on people's website. I think even on our website, we have it say as seen in whatever, NBC, Fox, whatever. Do you guys, by having a press release, and if it shows up on whatever, Fox, NBC, or whatever, can you actually say on your website or in your marketing materials that, as seen on whatever, NBC as an example?
I know people do it. It's not something that we promote, but we have clients who do it. I do know at the end of the day, the logos belong to the media entities. I think technically they could come back and say, "Hey, we'd rather not have that there." But then again, it's like they wrote about you, so I'm not sure. But I know that for us, it's not something that we put a lot of energy in, because we like to have the articles and we like to get the articles in front of people. We like to get people to take the articles and put them on their website, link to them, screenshot them, put PDFs available, take those links and to the articles while the article is live, and get that to your social media and stuff like that. Because what's more important than a logo that you were featured on is actually having them read something that was written by a human being, a writer, talking about your company. Because I'm guilty of this. I have given so much money to Indiegogos and Kickstarters that I don't even want the product or service, but I read about this person who was frustrated that nobody was doing this one product. It is like he went to the people that makes the product and says, "Can you tweak it and change it so I can use it in this application?" And nobody would. And so he's like, "Oh, I'm going to have to just do this myself." So I've met with people in China. I've got molds made. I'm ready to do this. And it's like, "Oh yeah, this guy is just out there fighting. Yeah, I'll give $35 to help him get this little widget made." And that's what happens when you read a good article and you hear about someone and you get invested in their story, because the journalist told it in a story format that first humanized them. You get to know them as people. You get to see what their individual challenge was and the obstacles that we're facing, and all of a sudden you see them making little milestones and you want to see them succeed. You want to see them get over the hurdle. And I think that's why those Kickstarter blog posts and articles, they do so well.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing, share your story. I find that a lot of small businesses have an imposter syndrome, so they like to be very polished. They don't want to share the vulnerability of how they started and stuff like that. And I say, hey, what's the first thing that someone does when they get on Shark Tank? They don't sit there and say, "I'm selling $8 million worth of widgets and this is how much profit I make. I want you guys to just throw gasoline on the fire by injecting $250 million in my business." No, they say, "I was laid off. My dad just died." Things like that. And they say, "Me and my dad used to have this hobby where we sold at the flea market, this little thing. And then someone said, while I was laid off, maybe you should do that. So I drained my 401k." And you're like, "Oh my God, they're so invested." And
People like
all
stories,
of a sudden,
no doubt.
you're
Buy a story. I mean, they don't buy the product; they buy the story, and usually it's a story that makes them feel good or bad, and that's really what matters. I think that. And by the way, here's a point that I would think when we were talking earlier about SEO. I think that press releases really are they have legs on them as far as SEO, and news media, obviously notwithstanding the news media, but if you post something by whatever, the New York Times picked something up you can use that for SEO for years, and people are always going to come back to it. It means so much, and it's very cheap. I think very cheap to do a press release overall. And if it continues to buy you new clients over the years, you're good to go. I mean, your rate of return is going to be huge. You know, it's just
Right.
unbelievable. It's funny how people don't think about press releases when they're so beneficial for a small business owner. It's crazy.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I don't go around bragging about, but I went through the dot-com crash. I went through the real estate uh, meltdown. I also went through the pandemic. We grow through all of those things.
Mm.
When there's uncertainty, people start freezing their ad campaigns and they go, what can we do that we're not spending 5,000 a month or 3,000 a month? And they're like, we've always, known that press releases are there. And all of a sudden people sit down and start doing PR campaigns. So we grew 40% during the pandemic. People were pivoting and wanted to communicate it. People were, pausing advertising and looking at smarter ways to spend their dollars. And so, and we haven't gone down to pre-pandemic levels. We've kept a lot of those people who put off PR, and then all of a sudden they recognized they needed to pivot. They recognized they didn't have a lot of money to advertise, and they turned to PR. And so I think that sort of speaks for itself that, PR is one of those things that people don't think about until they've cut off everything else. And I'm telling people, try to find room to fit in one press release a quarter while you're doing everything else, because you will be head and shoulders above everybody else in your industry. I've seen businesses that do PR while they're growing their business, and they get to $5 million, and they sell at a times factor many more times than the company doing the same revenue elsewhere, because they've been picked up in all the trade journals. When there's a merger or something going on in their industry, they get phone calls saying, can we get a quote from you? Because they've become thought leaders as a business in that industry. And that is worth many, many zeros to your valuation. And that's something that, paid advertising just can't do.
There's so many things you touched on there. Going back to your contrarian viewpoint. Now, if if everyone else is not spending money on marketing, you should be spending money on marketing. That's the right time to do it. And just like you're saying, if you have a kind of a series of press releases go out, and you have already built a system, I mean, your company is going to be worth more, because I would call it recurring revenue as a result, versus someone who doesn't have a press release going out on a series of basis. Your business is going to be worth more, and you're going to be able to sell your business for a lot more as a result. I mean, it's the system that makes sense in that regard versus a business that doesn't have a system for new business. So, all right, and let me ask some questions, some kind of nitty bitty questions that I know you, the godfather of, I guess, the modern press release, would be able to answer. I don't know what the difference is between a follow and a non-follow press release. Does that sound right?
Right. So the links to your website in a press release are generally no follow. So the link, so when it goes to Yahoo Finance, the places that syndicate it, Google has years ago said, hey, we recognize that this press release is being replicated on places as part of syndication. They have no problem with that, but they say best practice is to make it a no follow tag.
Got it.
And so that's it. Google itself was treating it as a no follow tag, but they just felt like it's easier for us to know it if you just tell us, because otherwise.
What about with LLMs? Because LLMs now are the thing with Claude, Mistral, Grok. I mean, the whole list. Do those have the same kind of, I guess, filters?
That I'm not sure about. I know that a lot of people are beginning to use AI as search, and it's changing what we do. And I know that Google's trying to sometimes give us some AI search results and things like that. But I'm not sure about those links, whether they're follow or not follow or anything like that. That's interesting. When people generally ask about those type of things, I say, when it comes to SEO and press releases, write your press release naturally. Make sure that important keywords are in there, but I wouldn't by a rule of thumb, make sure that you've mentioned your name 42 times or something like that. I just make it natural. But one thing I'm guilty of.
You want to have people read it. Yeah, I got you.
One thing I'm guilty of is I write blog posts And I always refer to a press release as a release because it's just shorthand that I'm used to. So I have to go back in there and add press in front of it a few times. But I don't try to stuff keywords or think about it because it's like every time someone says this is the formula, there's a shakeup and it's changed and it's different down the road. I find if you just write naturally, you write for what sounds good to your ear, making sure that you aren't using shorthand and that those keywords are in there. I think that's all you have to do. And I think that you will find that your SEO over time is going to be better and more consistent than trying to follow an SEO pattern of writing for this machine that sits going to spider your press release.
Yeah, I get it. So, okay, let's say I'm a real estate agent in this case, and I have a bunch of houses I'm selling as an example, and my team's growing, let's just say, or I'm hitting a bunch of milestones. What's too much press release work? Meaning, I don't want to deluge the market. Is that a thing or is it not a thing?
I think it's, I don't think you're going to oversaturate the market or make anybody upset, but I think you run the risk of just spending money without getting the best return. I say focus on the press releases that if you were a journalist would excite them. And if you read it and you're like, oh, we're having an open house here and it's just a regular colonial or something like that, that's probably not going to do it. But you're selling a house in the neighborhood that once belonged to a beloved mayor, and it's like, oh, it's got a little local historical interest or something like that. That's certainly worth perhaps sending out or even doing what I like to call local saturation. I tell people that when it comes to local media, the best place to get it is you, and do it yourself. And this is the easiest thing. If you think about it, there's probably less than 10 people in your market that would write about you locally. And so, look at your local paper. Who is the person who covers the real estate industry? Get their name. If their email address isn't online, call and ask for it. These are not celebrities. They're members of the community. They're supposed to be accessible. If they say, why do you want the email address? Say, hey, I'm a local realtor. I'm working on some story ideas that I'd like to pitch. And I'd just like to be able to send them a message. And they'll either give it to you or patch you through to them over the phone. And you leave a message and you just be consistent and until you get that email address. And when you email them, you don't need a press release. It's just a few sentences. But I do say, put an amazing quote in there. A journalist who's always looking at ideas know that if you have a mediocre quote, they can write the best article, but it's going to fall flat because of that quote. But if you have an amazing quote, they can envision a really great article around that, and that quote's going to help make it sing. And so what makes a great quote is, sure, you can be a wordsmith and all that, but generally it's just you paraphrase something and said it so strong using active verbs with such conviction that it's as tight as it could be. If a journalist was to paraphrase it, they'd probably have to turn it into 2 sentences, what you said in 1 sentence. So that's how you know you've written a really strong quote. And sometimes, saying something with conviction, saying something that no one else would say, almost contrarian is a good way to make sure you have a really great quote. But, send those few sentences, that idea to this person. You can do the same thing with your local business magazine or newspaper. We're fortunate to kind of have both here in Baltimore. We also have a Baltimore magazine, which is for consumers. If you have a consumer facing article or idea, you can find out who covers real estate or your industry at the magazine. And, once you've built this little Rolodex, it's yours and you can continue to reach out to them. I tell people, try to do it at least quarterly. And it's not unusual to do this for a year and nothing happens. None of them bite at any of your ideas. But what you'll find is, and I've had this happen probably about a third of the time, after a year, all of a sudden they get contacted by the media. And then the journalist goes, hey, I know you pitched me in the past. I've never used it, but I'm working on a story right now about this new development proposal and how that might impact the community. And I thought you might have some quotes or insights on this. Are you interested? And all of a sudden, they're asking you for a quote. When that happens, I tell people, breathe, say, I do have some great ideas. Could I write down some quotes and send them your way, and we could talk later this afternoon? Because I know that when I'm under the gun, I freeze up. So, that's a really great way to sort of buy yourself a little bit of time, maybe go and play around with ChatGPT or something to get some really strong quotes and stuff like that and send them along. But that's how it happens. And then once you get in there, it just gets easier and easier to get that local media.
Being a thought leader, that's really what you're saying. Become the thought leader. I think one way of doing that is reaching out to the reporters, as an example, what have you, because they down the road will reach out to you because they think of you as a thought leader, and that will end up bringing you in dollars down the road because you are the established thought leader. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think some people get a little worried about becoming a thought leader, but I mean, it will benefit people. Entrepreneurs out there, it will benefit you. I mean, here, me as an example, I mean, I never thought of myself as really a thought leader, even though we've been doing AI early, but now because just recently I was asked to be the contributor for the AI journal as far as tax and AI, and same thing when I was a Forbes.com contributor because of my expertise. So they came to me. And what's funny is like, it's surprising how many business owners are afraid to talk to journalists, though journalists, they have so little time. Just like you're saying, they're now required to do a lot more than they ever used to be. They want ideas, in my opinion. And I think what you're saying is exactly right. Give them a story, give them an easy quote, make their job easier. They'll be so much better off as a result of that. So, all right, I have a couple more questions. What's one example of someone who has elicited your services, they've used your services, and they were whatever, a small business owner, and then because of your services, they're doing mass press releases, and now they're, the next Bill Gates or whatever? Give me a good story.
Well, I had a client, clutch.co, that at the time that they worked with us many, many years ago, I kind of considered them sort of like like a link farm. They had a lot of little top 10s, like top 10 CRMs for architects, top 10 CRMs for salespeople, top 10, graphic design, CAD solutions for, this, that, and the other. And just a lot of top 10 lists across a lot of verticals. And I didn't see much value there. And then they started doing surveys for each of these industries. So they would do a industry survey for the architect industry. They do one for graphic designers. They would do one, and they would talk about things that were trending in the industry. Like right now, those questions would probably be a lot around AI and maybe also about changes in work culture post pandemic and things like that. So every time they did one of these surveys, they would write a press release about it. Generally, you don't focus on all the questions in the press release. You pick one that's the biggest surprise or shock, and then you usually have a link to all the questions and answers, so journalists could go and review them and see if there's interesting other things that they could write about. And you're going to put a quote in there about why you feel the numbers skewed in a particular way on this issue. Like maybe it's around AI. It's like graphic designers, 67% believe they're going to be replaced in the next 5 years by AI. And you could say, hey, I think this is a little bit of alarmist right now, but I do believe that maybe graphic designers who don't learn to work with AI are going to be at a very serious disadvantage, say in 5 years. And again, you seem very reasonable and you're not an alarmist or anything like that. But when clutch.co started doing that, they were getting like between 6 and 14 articles, mostly in trade publications, but also newspapers in those industries for every vertical. They were doing as many as 30 of these surveys a year and across all these verticals. And they started doing them annually. They've sort of pushed pause on that because today, every time there's a consolidation in the industry, an acquisition, they get contacted and say, can you give us your opinion how this acquisition affects the industry? They are such thought leaders now that they're getting all this media attention without having to go through all the surveys anymore, which are quite a bit of work. And so, that they now have so many authoritative links to their website from all of these trade publications across all of these different industries, including big news outlets like the Wall Street Journals of the world, the Washington Post. They now are sitting in a completely different position than when I first saw them. And you know,
Mhm.
it's amazing. They are very well recognized today. They have so much authority that they've created, and I would say 2/3 of that authority came from the media that they were getting over a series of like 5-6 years.
Yeah, that shows you're adding value there, Mickie. unnewsworthy.com. Wow, that was a good way to end. That's a good story because obviously they're making money, and I bet you on a very cost-effective basis. So that was a great way to end this episode. Now, I'm going to ask you to come back because I'm having fun. You're adding value, and hopefully you're going. Who knows? Maybe you're going to get some business from this. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Hey, once again, Mickie Kennedy, thank you very much for spending time with us. And for all you people out there listening, viewing, this has been the Vast Voice telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. Thanks, everybody.